Here's your bracket members: Dave Gilbert, Steve Painter, Rafael Flores, Walter Gleason, Nikita Lear, Cade Nelson, Logan Smith, Joey Wolf, Cayden Gasser. This is the Bracket U with your host, Coach Tonsoni.
Welcome to Bracket U, a college basketball bracket podcast brought to you by Delphi Bracketology. We are in our 9th year of bracketology work, and we just wish to bring you some updates on the NCAA tournament for those of you who want to know where your favorite team stands in regards to seeding for that NCAA tournament. This podcast is for all you junkies who have March Madness all season long, and we're only a few weeks away. The conference tournaments start next week, actually. We're able to do this and create new content thanks to the sponsorship of Coca-Cola Bottling of Kokomo, generous donations of our followers, which paid for the wings for our big meeting last night. We very much appreciate that. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for creating our intro music, for Cayden Gasser, who's joining us tonight for putting the intro together, the video intro, and thanks again to Jared Morris of the Assembly Call for inspiring us and teaching us how to do these podcasts. I'm Brian Tonsoni. Joining me is Junior Cayden Gasser and Senior Cade Nelson. Fellas, it's close to the time we really got to make some decisions. So thank you for joining us. And last night we had a group over here in the basement behind me. We looked at each resume and judged it, comparing it to the team's net ranking. We took the NCAA reveal, which happened last Saturday, looked at the reveal and tried to decide how do we best guess what that NCAA committee is going to do. So we looked at the entire resume, losses, strength of schedule, metrics, averaged out the predictive metrics and the results-based metrics, and we basically came up with, should a team move up or down from its initial placing? And that initial placing can be the net. That initial placing could be total quad ones and wins. We just wanted to look at the entire resume, not just a total number of quad one wins or wins. And we tried to place them into our bracket. That bracket is out on our website at delphibracketology.com along with our seed list. And we're probably going to update that every day, every afternoon as we go forward. So, fellas, as we went through last night, what were some of the lessons that you learned from that process of doing a deep dive on about 60 teams last night? Cade, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say that I just learned how to, put the whole body of work together and not overvalue one thing and leave out some of the smaller things that really make a difference when it comes down to the committee's decision. So things like, the quad one wins that we seem to like a lot, but, we tend to leave out the predictive or result-based metrics that we have that, the committee still looks at when they're trying to make their decision, and not let those things get overpowered by the net or the quad one wins.
And Cayden, for you, I thought last night meeting was one of our best in 9 years we've been doing this because, man, we really looked at each team, what was their strengths and what was their weaknesses of each team. So when we go to compare teams, we kind of had a spreadsheet now of information as well as those team sheets, but we really did that good dive. What did you learn?
I learned a lot. It kind of put it in perspective for where you are looking at teams. You're not looking at where we have them on the bracket already. You're looking at what we did last night was off the net, and you're seeing where you want to place them against that. You have to reanalyze your thinking and put them, say what you want to say for that certain net spot.
Yeah, I'm going to follow that up. I thought that's what made last night's meeting pretty solid is we looked at each team by itself. And while the net is not a standings board, it is a metric, and the higher or the lower the metric, the better. If you're a 3 net, you are supposedly a better team than a 37 net team. But we basically said, do you deserve that ranking? By your metrics, by your quality wins, by your quad 3 or 4 losses. If you're sitting at 24, that would be the top 6 seed. But what does the rest of the resume say? Did you deserve it? Did you earn it by winning games? Did you go on the road and win it? Did you schedule strong? And then we tried to interpret above a 6 or below a 6. And then we did the same thing kind of with the wins. We sorted everyone in our list by quad 1 and 2 combined wins to see where that ranked, with the idea that the team who's won more is better than the team that hasn't won more. But do you move up and down because of some of the other metrics that the committee may look at? And I agree with both of you that instead of looking at 1 through 68 and trying to move someone up and down right away, we looked at the quality of each team. And I think our whole committee now knows a lot more about each team than we did coming into the meeting. So, guys, we've identified a lot of close resumes all the way up and down the seed list line. And so I pulled out a few, and let's talk about them because this can change. There's 3 or 4 regular season games. Conference tourneys don't make a whole lot of difference because of the timing of the selection process, but there could make changes based on the first round or second round of some of these NCAA tourneys. So 3 or 4 opportunities to make some changes. And let's look at the first one. Indiana was 13th going into the reveal. They split a couple games since then. We believe they've kind of fallen inside the 4 seed line. They're still a 4, but they're getting pushed by teams on that 5 seed line. So let's look at, if Indiana's the last 4 and Miami of Florida is the first 5, how are you looking at that right now, that comparison? Because we think that could be a comparison being made. Cayden, Gasser, we'll go to you.
I kind of did what we did last night. I kind of went in a deep dive, looking at their record, strength of schedule, their road record, and how many quad 1 and 2 wins they have, and their quad 1 1-8 wins. After looking at that, they're both really close teams right now. I have Miami with the record, but Indiana with the strength of schedule and the quad 1 and 1A beat it, and Miami has no quad 1 1A wins. So Miami has a lot on them, but Indiana also has a lot on Miami.
So, Cade, when you look at the comparison of those two, what stands out and who do you think is better right now?
I would say the 2 biggest things that stand out for me is the fact that Indiana has no bad losses, so they have no quad 3 or quad 4 losses, and that Miami has no 1A wins, like Cayden said. So I think that the fact that Miami hasn't really beat anyone like crazy good and Indiana hasn't lost to anyone bad, I think that keeps Indiana where they're at. And, Miami just doesn't really have the power to move up. They have the wins, but they don't have the quality that it takes to move up to that 4 seed line.
I think that's the key. I think Indiana's quality wins, winning on the road at Xavier, winning on the road at Illinois, beating at Purdue, which is a number 1 seed, I think keeps it on the 4 seed line right now in some order. They were the number 1 4 seed in the reveal. We've dropped them a little bit with the loss to Michigan State, but they're still on that 4 seed line. That is important because I think sometimes we get caught up in the number of wins in quad 1 and the number of wins altogether, but I do think quality matters. I think Indiana's schedule has been tougher inside the conference. I think those things matter. Miami has road wins, but again, you look at the toughness of the conference. There's a lot of teams that have wins in the ACC on the road because half the conference isn't very good. So you go on the road in the ACC, you're going to win. So I think we got to be a little careful on that too. I think Indiana's still a 4 seed despite the loss. They have a real tough game coming up against Purdue. And so I think for Indiana fans, a 4 or 5 is probably where Indiana is going to be. If somehow they run the table and win, maybe push for a little bit higher. So we got a couple comments in the live chat. We appreciate that. Thanks. Mike Ham, with the loss at Purdue, dropped them from the 4 line. It's not a bad loss, and they aren't expected to win. We're not sure. It could, because if you look at our screen, if you're watching, obviously, on YouTube, Indiana has a scroll over here. They are 5-8 in quad 1, which is the green column. They would move to 5-9, and that compared to Miami 7-4, it starts to get a little shaky. The quality of their resume will not change, which will keep Indiana on the 4 seed, but that additional loss to go 10-10 overall in quad 1 and 2 could be the difference in dropping them. root against Miami Mike and Xavier and Creighton, and then even if Indiana loses, there's no one to replace them. So I don't think it's an automatic drop to the 4 seed line because of the expected, tough game. But I do think that's an interesting set of teams to watch. Then we go to the last 5 seed, and it is between St. Mary's, you can see that on the screen, and teams like Northwestern and TCU. Cade, will come to you. St. Mary's is tough because of the conference they play in, and Northwestern, while it doesn't have the metrics, the net of 38 and some other predictive metrics, they're winning a lot of quality games. What do you think about our cutoff on the 5 seed line?
Yeah, I think it's really tight, but it's tight because, it's teams on both ends of the spectrum. It's a team that doesn't have a very good net with some really nice wins, and then it's a team that has a good net but really doesn't have the wins. And I think the team that has the net will get the advantage in the final decision, because while St. Mary, doesn't have the amount of wins that Northwestern has, they still have a very quality win over Gonzaga and a good win over San Diego State. They've also been able to win on the road. So I think that with that 8 net, you can't really deny a team for playing that good of basketball, facing up against a team that, has won some games, but they've won games in a conference that has been tough, which St. Mary's really hasn't gotten that chance.
Yeah, Houston was a very high net last year, got a 5 seed with 0 quad 1 wins. So this St. Mary's resume kind of looks a little bit like that. I think the 8 represents that St. Mary's has played very efficient basketball. But, man, Northwestern is pushing. Last year, Wisconsin had a 24 net and got up to the 3 seed line because they had really great wins. Northwestern could be in that spot to move up from the 6 line to the 5 seed line. It would not surprise me on Selection Sunday. Cayden, your thought about this tough matchup between St. Mary's and Northwestern on our 5-6 cutoff?
I really like Northwestern because when I did what I did with the 4 seeds, I recategorized their metrics. I'm seeing that Northwestern is ahead of St. Mary's in almost all of them, but record. Quad 1A, they have 3 wins. Quad 1 and 2, you can see on your screen that Northwestern has 11, St. Mary's has 8. And the strength of schedule, Northwestern has a better conference one, but not very good non-conference. But I still think Northwestern beats them in that category. And I have a feeling Northwestern, if they play well, keep playing well, will move up.
Yeah, the net does not matter. I mean, just because a team has a higher net doesn't mean they're going to be seated higher. It's not a standings board. But a difference between 8 and 38, 30-point difference, I think will have to be answered. And we've seen it. We've seen a team like Rutgers get in with the 77. We've seen a team like Northwestern be the 9th team on the seed list with the 24. So there are some precedents of teams that have really good wins, and I think this committee likes top wins. So that bodes well for teams like Tennessee, Illinois, who have some really top-heavy wins. They might not have the numbers of wins overall. So those are the kinds of things that we talk about. If you're viewing on YouTube or you're watching the replay on our webpage, you do see our spreadsheet, and we color code the gray is the road wins, the green is quad 1, and moves to the right to the left, or from left to right, quad 2, quad 3. We color code them so we can quickly find them. We add some numbers over to the right for our seed list and combined quad 1 and 2 wins. And every one of our students and teachers in the club has 24-hour access. So we got a great question about Mississippi State. We didn't have them in, and we probably should have. We got a question on social media today, so immediately sent out an email to the whole group. I didn't know if they were in math, PE, science, in the library, or whatever. I said, hey, we need to make a decision. And we got 4 or 5 people to go to the spreadsheet and go to warrennolan.com and do some research today, and we came up with the decision within 45 minutes. So I hope they still got their homework done. I'm not really sure I care because I really want to do well on this bracket thing. And but those are some of the decisions that we have ahead of us going on. So moving next, the last 6 seed line, in fact, the whole seed line 24 through 36, which is the last six, the 7 seeds, the 8 seeds, and the 9 seeds, I think we could talk for 2 hours and come up with one set in order, and then the next hour have another set with good criteria, and then the third hour having another set of teams ranked in order and still have some good decisions made there. There's a lot of teams that have unique pieces on their resume. So we have Arkansas because they have won some games. They have 4 wins against the field. They have a very high net. We have Illinois because they have top-end wins. We have Michigan State because they have volume of wins. And then we made some changes today late this afternoon because of Kentucky and Duke moving from 8 to 7, and they could very easily move back to 8 if we just have a conversation today. This is how tight these 13 teams are. And it's going to be interesting to see how we end up deciding them and where they end up. And everyone that I talk with in the bracketology world says they get headaches looking at this range. So this is not set in stone. Heck, the last team on here, Auburn, could maybe be the 6th seed by the end of 10 days, and we get ready for Selection Sunday. So coming back to you, Cade, this is a mess. It's just really tight. What are your thoughts and some of the teams that you like? I know you texted me today, yay, Kentucky, moving Kentucky up. You were happy with our move from Kentucky up, so maybe that's where you want to go.
Yeah, and I would say that a mess might be a little bit of an understatement. But, I was looking at Michigan State first just because their strength of schedule is very solid. They have 10 total quad 1 and 2 wins. They only have 1 bad loss in quad 3. And they have that quantity of quad 1 wins. But then when you look at Illinois and Kentucky, I'm not sure if, the quantity can hold up against such great wins that Illinois and Kentucky have. But like you said, I was a big fan of Kentucky today looking back over them. Their strength of schedule is about as good as Michigan State's. Their net is better. Their road record is better. I would say their wins are better. And the only thing holding Kentucky back, I would say, is their quad 3 and quad 4 loss. But we've seen the committee before say that a team has gotten hot late in the year, and that has caused them to bump up a couple spots just because of the momentum they've built. And I was wondering that if Kentucky continues to win a couple games, if their momentum overlooks or outshines that quad 4 loss that is maybe holding them back.
I think that's a human element. It's not an official criteria. They used to have a criteria, guys, where it was your record in the last 10 games to kind of quantify that momentum. But I think it's hard for us to sit here and say Kentucky hasn't played great basketball. And deny that they have played great basketball. The last 10 days, they've gotten 3 quad 1 wins. And when you have a bracket that is so tight, 3 quad 1 wins jumps you up, and a win against a team like Tennessee, you move from I think they were the last 10 for us, or maybe the first 11, all the way up to consideration for a 7. We moved them up for a 7 seed, and that's kind of hard to do in the bracket world this late when there's lots of bodies of work. But I do think Kentucky with 10 overall quad 1 and 2 wins, some really good metrics of net of 29 is deserving. But again, we could meet tomorrow and say that, some other teams like Texas A&M, who's also been hot and has momentum, we have them on the 8 line. I just got done with talking with Graham Doran, and he's thinking about Texas A&M as a 6. So it's just so tight. Cayden, your thought about this last 6 seed all the way through the 9 seed. Any teams that stand out for you?
Illinois kind of stands out to me because when I did my research earlier today, it has Illinois in 2nd in all these places. The only thing I have against them is their road record, which is 3-5, which is below 500, which isn't amazing for them. But if you go to ESPN tonight, they're playing Northwestern against Northwestern, and that'll be a 1-8 quad 1-1-8 game for both teams. And if Illinois wins that, it's going to be hard to deny them moving up at least a little bit.
Where are they playing? If they're playing at Illinois, I think it's a quad 2.
It's at
38. Yeah, so for Illinois, it's a quad 2, but still it would help. Illinois would move to 5-2 in quad 2. Northwestern on the road, that is, if they win, that'll be their 8th. And really maybe push them, as we said earlier. Illinois is a team that has been win a couple, lose a couple, win a couple, lose a couple, and I think it loses, they lose some concentration from us because they don't have these big runs. But, man, they've beaten some good teams early. And you talk about momentum, Cade, Illinois could be the reverse. Played really well early and then just kind of average all the way through, but they're talented enough to win some games. So we currently have Illinois on the 7. We moved Duke from the 8 to the 7 line, and Duke doesn't have necessarily a great resume. But they have seven quad wins. Below them, Rutgers, Maryland, Texas A&M, and Florida Atlantic. It just seems like those teams, Rutgers is missing some starters. Maryland has won some really good games but play at home, but don't play well on the road. And Texas A&M has 2 quad 4 losses. I think that is what pushes them below Duke, Illinois, Kentucky, and Michigan State for me. And then you got some solid teams on the 9. Iowa, Providence, North Carolina State, and Auburn are all good basketball teams. You got North Carolina State at 22-7, and they're our 35th ranked team on our sheet. But I think the lack of wins for those teams and the high metrics of the net and the predictive metrics will keep Iowa, Providence. But I have seen Iowa up as a 6. I think that just shows everyone that if someone has Iowa as 6 and we have them as the first 9, and we have Texas A&M as an 8 and someone has them as 6, there's a lot of variance here in this bracket. So let's go down to what everyone talks about, the bubble, the first the last teams in and the first teams out. We moved New Mexico out this afternoon in favor of Mississippi State. We have some really good people who follow us. We appreciate it. Mike and Jack in the chat and people who watch and listen and interact with us. And they asked us a question about why we had New Mexico over Mississippi State. So I went back and looked at it, and I was like, dang, that person's right. So then I got on the email and sent out to everyone, hey, we need to relook at this. And we did, and we came up with the moving Mississippi State back in. So at the bottom of our spreadsheet, we usually try to seed teams 1 through 46, which includes some automatic qualifiers. If you're watching on the screen, the blue boxes on the left represent automatic qualifiers. The best team in the conference will end up being the conference tournament winners. And the top teams usually get seeded in, and we go 1 through 46, which is seed lines 1 through 11. And then you see all the small conference winners fill in seed lines 12 through 13. We just do that by process, even though that can be altered a little bit there. And then at the bottom of our spreadsheet are the teams that are under consideration but not in our field, and we try to sort them in order on a regular basis and as games play out. So right now it's New Mexico, Utah State. We have North Texas up there. Their resume is questionable, but we like that mid-major. Arizona State. Texas Tech is an up-and-rising team winning in a tough conference. Penn State playing Ohio State tonight. Michigan and Rutgers playing. And then Virginia Tech is sitting there. Seton Hall, North Carolina. After that, we have Clemson and Wake Forest and Villanova on the list. But and Villanova's at 14 and 14 are going to have to win out. Other than that, those are the teams that we're considering right now. Teams that are below that, Oregon, Charleston, Florida, can win and get back into consideration. But it's time. It's 10 days away from conference tournament time. And you better have your resume pretty much set to be included in the field by then. Only a team or two can really work their way in based on early conference results. So, fellas, as we look at this list of about 12 teams that aren't in our field but we are watching, talk to me about a team and what you think might happen to move them up into the field. Cayden, we'll go back to you first.
Sorry about that. I kind of want to look at Texas Tech and how they're playing because, like we said earlier, they're playing better than they were. Looking at their net team sheet, they have one 1A win, which isn't amazing. Oh, they have two 1A wins, West Virginia and Texas. And most of these games are actually close for the rest of their 1A games. And I think they could probably pull it back even with that quad 3 loss to Oklahoma at home.
I don't have the Big 12 schedule memorized, but when you look at, we have teams just barely in the bracket. I'll scroll back up for people who can see the screen. We have West Virginia and Oklahoma State on the 11 seed line. Those teams can fall out. There's some tough games left. Anytime you play any game in the Big 12, it's tough. So, Oklahoma State could go on a losing streak and knock themselves out. West Virginia, if they don't win, can knock themselves out. And that makes, even though you don't replace those teams necessarily with the same conference, if Texas Tech wins 3 games and gets to 19-12, and some of those other teams in there, they eliminate the competition and move up. I think Texas Tech is a real solid team. The thing that's hurting them for me is the 321 non-conference schedule. And if you're really one of the last teams in, Indiana got in last year with the 308 strength of schedule in the play-in game. So that's not a killer necessarily, and the conference is so tough. I do think Texas Tech has a chance to get in. I think that's a really great call. Cade, we got several teams on there. Which team are you watching, or which team would you like to talk about?
I would say I'm watching 2 teams, and originally I was only watching Oregon, which you might have to, scroll a little further down your spreadsheet for. But
there we go. They're way down there, Cade.
Yeah. Well, I like Oregon because they have one really nice quad 1A win over Arizona. They have their strength of schedule is, pretty good. I would say one of the better ones, or if not the best, outside of the bracket right now. And they also have the most quad 1 and 2 wins combined. They have, or like out of the bracket. So they have 8 quad 1 and 2 wins, and that's the most out of every other team that's above them. So I think that stat, along with that quad 1A win, I think, beats out a couple other teams that might not have as good as a net or as good as a win as they do, along with, being able to win in quads 1 and 2. But my other team would be Utah State, and I say Utah State real fast just because of their net, and since Houston was a team that didn't have a single quad 1 win last year, and that dropped them down to a 5 seed. I think that since they were still able to be solidly high in the bracket last year, I think that means Utah State, with their net how it is right now, being better than anyone else's, I think that, the no quad 1 wins doesn't really hold them back that much.
So going back to Oregon, in past tournaments, you'd have to be at least 3 or 4 games above 500 in your overall record. Oregon's sitting at 15-13, which means they need some wins. They have 3 games they should win, although Stanford has played some good basketball out west lately. They're at Oregon State, home to California, and home to Stanford. None of those teams will be quad 1 or 2 wins. So that doesn't really boost your resume, but Cade, you're right. They have 8 right now, which is enough to get them in the tournament. That would put them at 18, and then maybe they'd have to win a game or 2 in the tournament to get in. But they do have the quality. They do have the quantity of wins to get in. And then your Utah State is a great question. They have 0 quad 1 wins. So they're 6-5 in quad 1 and 2, which is good to be over 500. A quad 3 loss, a quad 4 loss. Great metric of 31 net. I'd have to look at their team sheet to see their predictive metrics. 5 wins on the road, 4 neutral, 9-5. I do think that's a team to watch. And the Mountain West has been really good basketball. Boise State, Nevada, and even teams on the bottom have San Jose State, who hasn't been very good in the second year under Coach Tim Miles, is really doing some things and playing good basketball. Air Force is capable of winning a game or so. So the whole conference, I think, is a lot deeper. And I think that might be a squad. 31 net is a very good net, and very rarely do teams under 35, getting into the tournament. So the team for me is New Mexico. We had them in, I think I had them in because of the same reason you're talking about Utah State, that I had respect for the Mountain West Conference. But, man, when you compare them to some other teams, those 3 quad 3 losses and quad 4 losses really dragged down anything positive on their list. So I felt very comfortable, and it was unanimous with the people who researched today, got back. It was unanimous that New Mexico should have been dropped out. But those are some teams we would love the mid-majors. I don't think North Texas, with their 1 quad 1 win and their 2 quad 2 wins, has enough to make it as an at-large, even though the Conference USA is, I think, the 10th rated conference in KenPom. And I think the Conference USA has played good basketball. They're better than the A10 this year. I would like to see 2 teams from that conference get in. I'm a little afraid if North Texas beats FAU in the tournament that FAU might not be in, but I think FAU is pretty safe. That conference, I think, deserves, from a basketball purist, two teams in rather than the Big Ten or the SEC getting multiple teams in it, 17 and 14 or 17 and 13, just because they had more opportunities. So those are some of our top teams that are outside looking in. This changes so much. Like it said today, we got done with our meeting, had one thing, and by noon we changed a few things, and then by 4 o'clock we changed a few other things, because we're just going to keep looking. And some people might ask us, well, no one played and you moved teams. Well, we're constantly looking at this, and I encourage all of our team members to text me something if you see it. If you have time during science or whatever, take a look at 2 teams, because we want to make the right decision next week or in 2 weeks when we have to turn it in. And so that's where you might see teams move without any results, because we're constantly evaluating it for you, our followers. So, Mike Ham, you have another question. It says, outside of winning the conference tourney, does UNC have a realistic chance of getting in? That's a great question. I wish I had the answer. I think they do, without winning the conference championship, have a slight chance. And here's why. They play Virginia, who has been struggling, but if they win, that is going to be a quad 1 win. That gets them on the board, because right now they're 0-9 in quad 1. And they play Duke. I think they have to win both of those games. That would be 2-9, and that would make them 8-11 with no quad losses. Great schedule strength. I think if you beat Virginia, if you're a North Carolina fan or rooting for North Carolina, they have to beat Virginia and have to beat Duke. I don't think they get in with a split. And then, obviously you can't have an early exit in the ACC tournament. But the thing about tournaments, and Mike, I'm glad you brought that up, is the committee starts talking on Tuesday and Wednesday. And some of these tournaments, just the first rounds get going, and sometimes by, Friday afternoon, when some quarterfinals in the Big Ten are being played in the SEC, a lot of the teams are already selected. And so I guess if North Carolina wins 2 games early in the conference, that could help them be included. I think that helped Indiana last year, winning on Thursday. Got them in, and winning on Friday solidified them being in. But if you don't get your work done by Friday afternoon, Friday evening, a semifinal win or something like that, Texas A&M got all the way to the finals in the SEC championship and didn't get left in. That'll tell you that Saturday and Sunday of championship week are really tough to move teams either in or out or up the seed line. Whether that's right or wrong, that's a whole nother discussion going forward. But, yeah, I think North Carolina has to win. I don't think they're out, but I think they have to win those games to have a chance. Otherwise, they gotta win. All right, time to end our show. We do so with the segment called Game Winner. And our Game Winner question this week is, which team will get the most attention for being in the tournament but seeded incorrectly in the eyes of Dick Vitale and the media and fans? Which team and will get seeded, and teams will be upset about their seed? Cade, we'll start with you.
I think my team that, people might get upset with, or the team themselves would get upset with, is West Virginia. they play really good basketball. Well, not really good, but good basketball with a net of 26. And they play in a really tough conference with 4 quad 1 wins. And I think that, you got to give them some credit for being able to pull out 4 quad 1 wins while being in such a tough conference. And I think with how well they're playing basketball right now, if they get into the tournament against a team that, they haven't really faced before, I think they still have a very solid chance to beat that team, because most of the games they've been playing for the second half of the season have been against the best conference in the country. So, if you're playing such a good schedule, it's going to be hard to get quad 1 wins and wins on the road. But if you're able to keep your metrics good, then I think that, not really anyone can overlook that.
For me, it's Duke. Whether you have Duke at the 7, 8, or 9, I think someone's going to be upset with Duke, either thinking that they're such a good team because they're Duke, that how can they be an 8 seed or how can they be a 7 seed, that they're underseeded, and oh my gosh, how can you disrespect Duke? But their resume is a 7, 8, or 9. You can't argue that they need to be higher. And I know Duke has always been 1 seed talk and 2 seed talk, but they're a 7, 8, or 9 this year. We have them as a 7 currently, but I could just see on Selection Sunday all the people in the ESPN and all those places talking about the brackets. How Duke as a 7? That's unfair to the 2 seed, or as an 8 seed, that's unfair to the 1 seed. They're underseeded, and they'll pull out North Carolina last year, going from 8 to the championship game and so forth. But you have to accomplish something in the season. You don't get placed on the NCAA committee on the tourney line because of your name. You've got to have a resume. So I think you're going to see Duke catch a lot of grief there. Cayden, which team will probably set off people that they're not happy with where they're seated?
I'm thinking about FAU. I know it's a small team, and they're hopefully going to win their conference tournament. But if you look, they have the highest strength of schedule out of anybody in the bracket right now, and they beat everybody by at least 58 points in the bracket for strength of schedule. And they also have the lowest amount of quad 1 and quad 2 wins, which is 5. Most teams, lowest I'm seeing is 6, but most teams have 8, 9, 10 wins in quad 1 and 2. And I really think that if they're not going to play many more big games, then they're going to get replaced by teams like Iowa and Auburn and North Carolina State real quick.
Yeah, that's a team that if you seed them at the 7, everyone's going to say there are teams that should have been seeded higher for them. And if they're seeded at a 10, some people say, oh, they got disrespected. They're 20-something 3, 26-3. So yeah, I think we've identified some of the teams that are hard for us to seed. Obviously, I think a lot of people will be confused as to why those teams end up on the seed line for their resumes. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Bracket U. We'll be back again next week, and we're almost done. We might do a special podcast either Monday or Tuesday and bring some guests on as well. But until then, check out our website, DelphiBracketology.com. Hit the seed list, hit the bracketology. It's right there on the main page, the tab that'll take you to those places. Follow us on Twitter at Delphi Brackets. Send us a note, a question. We like to answer the questions that come in. And please understand, this is a fluid situation for us. We're not always right, but we will try to answer and give information because it's about sharing what we know for you and your team. And we encourage you to check out our donation page. Again, we had a Purdue fan who gave a generous donation and bought wings for us for our students. We appreciate it, and there are some other expenses that we have if you're so inclined. So for Cade Nelson and Cayden Gasser, I'm Brian Tonsoni, wishing you good night.